So this video develops a little bit further something that we looked at in the first production video when we were looking at productive efficiency. If you remember, we talked about the average cost curve and the shape of it, and mentioned this concept of economies of scale. And this video, it aims to explain a little bit more what they are and why they affect businesses. The first thing to make sure that we understand, though, is the definition. This is one of those definitions where people tend to not give it in enough detail, not precise enough, and therefore they give up marks. Two key elements of this definition. Firstly, it is a reduction in average costs. Okay, you must say that. Reduction in cost is incorrect. It is a reduction in average costs. The second thing is that it occurs as output increases. A lot of people say the business gets bigger. Again, not properly accurate. Okay, bigger may mean several things. The important thing here is that as output increases. So please remember those two key elements of definitions. Firstly, that is a reduction in average costs, and it occurs as output increases. Now let's have a look at the little diagram that I've just sketched out below, because that shows kind of in a visual form what we've just said there. So what we've got then, as we move from output Q to output Q1, you see that is obviously an increase in output, as we said here. So we've got an increase in output from Q to Q1, and as a result of that, we are moving down our average cost curve like this, resulting in the reduction in our average costs from P to P1. So what we can see on this diagram here is economies of scale occurring as the business grows and output increases. The average costs start to fall. So the next slide is going to look at some of the reasons why this may well occur. So, according to most economics textbooks, you will find that there are 6 types of economy of scale, 6 reasons why average costs tend to fall as a business grows. So, reading from the top left, we have technical economies of scale, purchasing economies of scale, marketing, managerial, financial, and risk-bearing economies of scale. And all of these are reasons why, as the business expands and increases its output, it may well be able to reduce its average cost. So we're going to look at these quickly one by one and explain how they might do just that. So technical economies of scale. A lot of people get themselves tied in knots around technical economies of scale. They're quite straightforward, really. The general idea behind a technical economy of scale is that big things tend to be more efficient than little things. Really good examples of this are kind of various capital things. The example we're going to look at here is transport. So as you can no doubt tell from my quite stunning artwork, we're going to look at two types of vehicle here. Now the top one, believe it or not, is supposed to be kind of a normal kind of transit van type thing, and the one at the bottom is a much larger kind of articulated lorry type arrangement. So I've just given a few kind of very simple facts about each of these. So our little transit van can transport 100 units. Obviously needs a driver, and it will take 50 litres of fuel to do a particular journey. Our big Arctic lorry will take 500 units. It still obviously needs a driver, and it's going to take 100 litres of fuel. Now, which one is going to cost more for this journey? Now, the one that's going to cost more is the big lorry, because it requires more fuel, and the driver will presumably have to be more highly qualified to drive something of this size. So the driver will also cost more. So which one costs more? The big lorry. But for which one is the average cost more? Now, the average cost is going to be higher in the smaller van. So average cost will be higher in the smaller van. And that's because although the costs are higher for the bigger van, they're not 5 times higher. The big lorry transports 5 times as many units as the small transit van. So although it costs more because of the increased amount of fuel and probably the more expensive driver, average cost, the cost per unit transported, will be lower in the big lorry because it transports so many more units. So that's what we mean by a technical economy of scale. And this is the reason why you see the kind of the big ocean tankers getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So companies like Maersk and companies like that, massive ships, because once you have a very, very big ship, the cost of kind of increasing its size further, it doesn't really require many more staff. The extra fuel is relatively minimal, and yet you can transport more of the units. So it becomes more efficient, i.e. a lower average cost, to have larger transportation vehicles. Now, moving on to purchasing economies of scale. Purchasing economies of scale, much simpler to understand, mainly because it's something probably you've already come across. Purchasing economies of scale, in essence, is bulk buying. So companies with a larger output are going to be buying products, buying raw materials in greater quantities. And as such, they may well be able to negotiate greater discounts. Now, as I said, I'm sure you've come across this in a supermarket when you've seen 3 for 2s on chocolate bars or something like that. When you buy larger quantities of something, the cost for the cost for each unit goes down. So let's look at our bulk buying example then very quickly. So let's say our chocolate bars are 50p each, or 3 for £1. A very, very common sort of deal that you will see in a supermarket. So if I buy 1 chocolate bar, I pay 50p. If I buy 2 chocolate bars, I pay £1, but I can also get 3 chocolate bars for £1. So my average cost here is 50p, but my average cost here is 33 1/3p. So by buying in greater quantities, I have reduced my average cost. Again, this shows very clearly why it's important to say average cost. My overall cost here has gone up. Buying 3 for £1 costs me more than buying 1 at 50p. But my average cost, the cost per unit I buy, has gone down. And that's what makes it an economy of scale. Marketing economies of scale, similarly, relatively straightforward to understand. A marketing economy of scale is all about spreading fixed costs. Okay, there are some costs for a business where they are not directly dependent on output. So the more units we sell, the more divided up we can make those fixed costs. So let's say I'm doing an advertising campaign that's going to cost me £1,000. If I sell 100 units, that marketing will cost me £10 per unit. If I sell 1,000 units, that marketing campaign will only cost me £1 per unit. So again, in this case, by being bigger, by having an output of 1,000 units rather than 100, I have reduced my average cost. Again, just to emphasize this, the total cost remains unchanged. The overall cost is £1,000 regardless. But what we're talking about here is the average cost. That's what makes an economy of scale so important. So let's whiz over here then to managerial economies of scale. Managerial economies of scale are all to do with skills. Okay, so a small business will generally have one person that oversees a lot of the functional areas. They will have one person that's the general manager, they probably do the marketing, they probably do the accounting and all sorts of other things as well. So they have one multifunctional manager. Disadvantage of being multifunctional is you're unlikely to be specialised in specific things. Okay, so when it's a small business, you have just one manager who is doing multiple different tasks within the business. As the business gets bigger, though, it can justify bringing in more specialised people. A smaller business couldn't. It wouldn't have enough for them to do. You wouldn't find a corner shop employing a marketing manager because you wouldn't be able to find enough things for them to do to actually warrant their cost. So a bigger business, though, will have the overall manager, the chief executive, and they will then oversee more specialised functional managers. And because each of those is focused on a more specific area, they will be more specialised. They will perhaps have better contacts, they will know how to do things more efficiently and so on. the reason that this is linked to output is because as the output goes up, it becomes more justifiable to employ these people. So when a business is small, it makes no sense to employ these specialists. As a business increases its output, it makes more sense because these more specialized people will have enough to do to keep them going. On then to financial. Another relatively straightforward one, this one. This one is all to do with the cost of borrowing. Now, I'm sure that you have seen on TV adverts, whenever there is a mortgage advert or anything like that, there's a disclaimer at the end that goes along the lines of the rate that you pay or the interest that you pay is dependent on your personal circumstances, blah, 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 blah. This is to do with those personal circumstances. The more risky you are, the higher interest you have to pay to borrow money. So banks will generally offer loans at a lower rate of interest to larger, more secure companies. So a bigger business will get loans at better rates because banks, all other things being equal, will see them as being safer and more secure. Finally then, risk-bearing economies of scale. Risk-bearing economies of scale is all to do with the cost of product line failure. Now, however good businesses are, every now and then there will be a situation where one of their product lines goes out of fashion, somebody releases a better one, something like that. Okay, risk-bearing economies of scale suggest that when a business is large with many different product lines, the risk of any individual one failing is relatively insignificant. Okay, so let's kind of take a bit of an example here. So let's think about an example. So let's take Procter & Gamble. Okay, so Procter & Gamble, a massive conglomerate company with a number of household brands that you would recognise, kind of food products and cleaning products and all sorts of things. The chances of all of them failing all at once is basically zero. Whereas a smaller business with one single product line, so let's say, for instance, Innocent Smoothies or something like that, if smoothies suddenly went out of fashion, then Innocent Smoothies would be in a lot of trouble because they don't have anything else to fall back on. Procter & Gamble, though, if one of their product lines fails, then they have numerous others. So the risk of a single product line failing is far, far less significant for Procter & Gamble than it is for Innocent Smoothies. So all of those factors there, those 6 factors, are reasons why businesses can reduce their average cost as they get bigger. And hopefully that explains the different sorts of economy of scale which exist.